videos from time to time. I am also a professional and certified fertility awareness educator, so everything that you're seeing here on this chart is part of what I do for a living, and I'm really, really passionate about it. And I feel like when it comes to making ASMR videos, I've always wanted to make videos that I feel passionate about and that they're about topics that I really enjoy. So we're going to be looking at that today. Now, this chart in particular, as you can see, it's from earlier in the year. It's from back in March. Now, I wanted to walk through this one because I feel like it shows kind of a pretty standard cycle for the most part, and it has a lot of the features that we're typically looking for in a healthy cycle. So we're going to start with this whole entire thing first, and then we'll kind of zoom in on the different little details and parts of it. So what exactly is this chart? Like, what is it showing us? Well, a chart from Reader Body is basically a tool that you're going to be utilizing to then make your own interpretation. So, Reader Body basically acts as like a data storage bank where you can put in your day-to-day observations about your menstrual cycle and about your ovulation cycle. I'll use those words interchangeably because ultimately they're the same thing. And really, ovulation is the main event of the cycle, not actually menstruation. So as a whole, what we're seeing here on this chart is we're seeing a whole entire cycle. On the left, you can see those little red squares, and those indicate menstruation. And it goes all the way through the cycle until the right side. We're reaching the end of that whole entire cycle. In this case, it was a 24-day cycle. And so when we talk about the cycle, we're not just referring to the bleed or menstruation. We're really talking about and thinking about the whole ovulatory cycle that takes place from day one of menstruation in the first cycle all the way until the next cycle begins, essentially. So when we start up here on the top left portion of this chart, we can just see the Read Your Body logo, and we can see that this particular cycle is cycle 12. Now, Read Your Body allows you to just keep track of what cycle number you're recording. This number isn't totally actually accurate for me because this was my 12th cycle in Read Your Body, but before that I've been charting for many years, so I don't know, this might have been like my 50-something-ish cycle. I honestly don't know, but it's definitely up there in the 50s or 60s because I've been doing this for quite a while. So next we're seeing the date when the cycle starts, the 6th of March 2021, and as you can see, that corresponds to the little date line right here below there. It goes all the way through the 29th of March 2021, which again corresponds with this little date line at the top right here. So below the date, we have the day of the week, and this is super helpful as we're reading our chart because things like sleep schedules will change throughout the week depending whether it's the weekend, weekday, whether the person is working a night shift ovulation or menstruation align with the full moon or the new moon. So for me, I kind of just find this link kind of just like interesting. I don't put too much stock in it beyond that though. But I know that there are lots of people who feel a deeper connection with that aspect, which by all means I encourage, because I think it's interesting to feel that deeper connection with nature. So by all means you can do that. But for me personally, I just think it's kind of just interesting to note, but I don't really let it influence any thoughts or opinions on my cycle overall in any meaningful way. So it's kind of cool, but beyond that, I'm personally kind of meh on the topic. Now, as we continue in our little exploration of this chart, we then see this little bar right here on the left, and as you can see, there are little temperature numbers. Now, we're going to actually take this opportunity to zoom in on the chart here, and we can see the same chart just a little bit closer. So on the left, we have a temperature range, and this range on this particular chart happens to be in Fahrenheit, but you can change it to Celsius if you're someone who charts in Celsius. As you chart, your body is going to automatically adjust this range for you. Now, for me, this is one huge advantage of using a charting app over a paper chart, because it's automatically making these little adjustments for you, and it's yielding in the end a beautiful, organized chart that's very clear to read. On the flip side, for me as an educator, sometimes reading handwritten or hand-drawn charts is a little bit challenging, because the person may have needed to make adjustments and, erase and relabel different things, which can sometimes make it a little bit difficult to read unless they have really nice, detailed writing. But for the most part, I think always people should chart with whatever strategy best fits them. So for me, I love the ease and the portability and the convenience of using an app. But for so many people, they love the creativity and the power and the ability to make their chart look the way that they want to make it look. And they do that through pencil and paper and art, or artistic expression and decoration. And I think that's gorgeous and beautiful. And again, I say more power to you. My one little request is just, if you happen to be working with an educator, just try and keep the writing a little neat. So that if you're sharing your chart with your educator, they'll be able to see and easily read what you're writing there. So, now that we kind of see this here, I guess we can also scroll down a little bit further and just look at these other categories here. So we have the time that each temperature is taken, so let's actually unpack that a little more. Now, on this chart, you're seeing these little dots and lines and how they connect and stuff. So what this is each day, with the fertility awareness method, particularly the symptothermal method, you are waking up, and as soon as you wake up, you literally take your temperature with what's called a basal thermometer. And it does need to be a basal thermometer as opposed to a typical traditional fever thermometer, because basal thermometers are going to be much more accurate and precise, and they're able to detect this really subtle shift in temperatures that happens before ovulation, as you can see here, where I'm circling with my little red pointer, versus after ovulation, which you can see here, which I'm kind of pointing to over here with my red pointer. And you can plainly see that before the temperatures trend lower, ovulation, we see a sustained upward shift in temperature that lasts for at least, several days. And what's really important to note if you ever want to try this method as natural birth control like I do, is that there are specific rules and criteria that you need to look for and know in order to establish and evaluate whether this upward shift in temperatures is valid and accurate. Because if you're kind of just eyeballing it, it's just not going to be accurate enough to know for sure whether ovulation has taken place. And when we're talking about something as important as birth control and using this method to literally avoid pregnancy effectively, it's only going to be as effective as the quality of the data that we're putting on the chart, and then the way that we're interpreting the chart. So this method that we're talking about, it's going to be best for people who are conscientious and they're able to pay attention and chart accurately. This is not going to be a good match necessarily for those who, again, want to kind of just eyeball things and guess at things, unless of course you are comfortable with a potential unintended pregnancy. If that's something that would be okay with you, then you could do that. But for myself and the clients that I work with, we're really focusing on the need to seriously avoid pregnancy for whatever reason. That may be that the person never ever wants to get pregnant. It may just be that they don't want to get pregnant for right now. Again, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter to me at all what people's reasoning is. What matters to me is that they are given the education and tools to use this method effectively for themselves. And what's really awesome about this method and kind of learning all this is once you know it like the back of your hand, and then you can just go through life with this kind of I don't know, stash of knowledge that you're using to really understand a lot about your cycle. So it's really cool. It's kind of like a secret superpower in a way. You just gain so much knowledge about literally what's happening inside of your body, and you're seeing it in a concrete form on a chart in front of you that you can show other people and show your partner and show your doctor and stuff. And I just think it's so fascinating. So all of that is my long way of saying that these are temperatures taken each day, each morning. And we only need to take one temperature each morning, and then we'll be pretty much good to go. And again, of course, there's some extra rules and caveats that people need to know. But in general, this is the gist of what we're talking about. So below these temperature lines here on this little horizontal line, we're going to zoom in again and see that this little horizontal line refers to the time that the corresponding temperature was taken. So for example, on cycle day 8, when we go down, this temperature at 96.8 was taken at 7:31 in the morning. This temperature on cycle day 12, right here, was taken at 6:43 in the morning. So the reason why we want to record the temperature and the time accurately is because the time that you take your temperature actually really can impact what type of temperature you end up with. So our temperatures at our core, our basal core temperature, is going to be the most consistent and typically the lowest between about 3 a.m. to about 6 a.m. overnight. And so when people take their temperatures later in the day, significantly later, questionable. And if that's the case, then we would actually mark it as questionable, and then on the chart it's gonna like turn gray basically, and that just means that we would need to ignore that temperature. There's several other factors like alcohol consumption that can also cause questionable temps, but these are patterns that each individual needs time to establish and explore for themselves, because it's not going to be exactly the same person to person. We're all individuals with unique bodies, and what affects one person might have absolutely no effect on someone else. I'll give you an example. So, as some of you may know, I have a chronic, what's called neuroplastic pain condition, which has gotten a lot better lately, but it kind of comes and goes. And for me, I sleep every single night with a heating pad, and it goes off after about 2 hours, and I only keep it on low, but there are some times when I accidentally keep it on high. And for me personally, regardless of like whether or not I use it, I find that it actually has no impact at all on my basal temperature, which like is kind of counterintuitive, because you'd think that if you're literally laying on a heating pad and you're physically hotter, you'd think that that would increase your basal temperature, right? Well, I can tell you from years of doing this and using heating pads and blankets and things like that, that for me, for whatever reason, it actually doesn't have any significant effect on my basal temperature in either direction. And again, this is something that I've taken time to establish over, cycles and cycles and cycles, and the same can be true of someone who might be, ingesting alcohol or using like medical or recreational cannabis or something like that. And there's lots of things that can impact your temperature, and it's really fascinating to find each person's pattern for themselves over time. So that's just a note about the time and why that matters. Now next, we're looking at this section right here, and these different colored bars and squares are basically just the different types of either bleeding or cervical mucus that we see throughout the cycle. Now for our bleed, we see that here with these red little squares, and within the squares are these little bars. So the 3 bars means heavy bleeding, the 2 little bars mean medium bleeding, and then the 1 little bar just means light bleeding. This little polka dot square means spotting, so bleeding that's like even lighter than light bleeding, which we call spotting. So I would chart that there. Then we have these different colored bars. Now for the method that I teach a method called FEMM. That's FEMM. It stands for Fertility Education and Medical Management. Now within FEMM, it's a particular method of fertility awareness. So fertility awareness is like one big umbrella term, and then FEMM is like a subcategory of that, that basically just looks mainly at cervical mucus. That's where it really shines. And then we also look at LH testing right here, these little yellow pluses and minuses, and we'll get to those in a second. But in my course, I do also teach temperatures, as we can see, because I feel that temperatures are really important to understand what's happening in your cycle overall, in addition to, cervical mucus and bleeding and LH testing. So these different little cervical mucus bars are going to be the navy color for ES mucus, ES mucus is going to share the same exact qualities from person to person, regardless of like the amount. So let's actually check out the cervical mucus project right here, and we're going to take a look. We're going to go to the cervical mucus project there. It's just at cervicalmucus.org. And I'm really like zoomed in right now just for the sake of this video recording, but this is how it would normally look. And so it's a really, really simple website, but when you go to the tab at the top and we look at images or videos, you can explore this, totally for free. So we're going to go all in. We're going to look at the peak type of cervical mucus. Peak is just another way of saying ES mucus. It's the same exact thing. And this type of cervical mucus is basically an indicator of whether or not you are fertile in the cycle, as well as the amount of estrogen that your body is producing. So when you see this type of mucus, and we'll scroll down in a second and we'll take a look at some examples, you'll know that the body at that point in time is producing high amounts of estrogen for you and your body. So if you're someone who's ever seen this type of cervical mucus, like in your underwear or like when you go to wipe, just know it's totally normal, totally healthy. You do not have an infection. You're totally like gorgeous and beautiful, and you're all good, okay? So let's take a look at this, and you're gonna see a range of how it shows up for different people, okay? So, and as we walk through, I'll also just say, like, the reason why our body makes this is, there's lots of reasons, but it comes from the cervix, under the influence of high estrogen. So basically, your body at a certain point in the cycle is making higher estrogen. That's gonna go tell the cervix, hey, it's time to make this ES mucus. And ES mucus's literal job is to change the environment of the vaginal canal from highly acidic and hostile to sperm, and it actively kills sperm. And the ES mucus is going to come in and bathe the vaginal canal in the ES mucus and literally change it from highly acidic to more basic on the pH scale. And a basic environment on the pH scale is going to be a lot more friendly and nourishing to sperm life. And it basically helps to house sperm and feed sperm and transport sperm, in order for sperm to kind of do its job of hopefully, reaching an egg. Now, if you're hearing this and you're like, wait, I don't want the sperm to reach an egg, well, join the club. And, it's totally fine, but whether or not you want it, that ultimately is how the biology and the physiology of it works. And so, our desire of our goals, of course, can differ from what evolutionarily and on a biological level, like what the body is trying to accomplish. So, having said all that, let's finally take a look. Okay, so as you can see, this is like literal mucus. It's clear, it's stretchy, it feels very slippery and very lubricative. And again, if you are someone who ovulates and menstruates, chances are you have seen this type of mucus at some point in your life. It's super common for teens who are starting their cycles to experience even more, and to get it in more abundant quantities because their hormones are really fluctuating a lot. And then as we get older, into our 20s and our 30s and our 40s, cervical mucus production tends to, slightly taper off over time, and you may not see it as much throughout the whole cycle. Now here's an example where it's not clear in color, but it is stretching, a significant amount. So this is still going to be ES mucus right here, even though it does look different from, these other samples like up here, and that's okay. That's totally within the spectrum. their cycles. They've been on hormonal birth control in the past. They've never been on hormonal birth control, and now they're, having regular natural cycles. But regardless, this is how it can look for people, which is just super fascinating. And by the way, speaking of natural cycles, all of these observations are what we see in a natural cycle that is not under the influence of synthetic hormones. So these are observations that you're not really going to see if you're on any form of hormonal birth control. The whole aim of hormonal birth control is to literally shut down the ovulation cycle so that ovulation isn't even happening, and therefore pregnancy can't happen. If there's no egg even being produced, then there's nothing for sperm to fertilize, and so therefore pregnancy can't happen. However, although that's true, ovulation and the event of ovulation is actually really important for people's natural hormone production. And naturally ovulating is the only way that menstruators can make the hormone progesterone, which is super important for mental health, for building our bones, for breast health and brain health. So there's a host of benefits to just having your natural cycle in the way that we have developed over the millennia. And so, having said all that, this is different ways that this mucus can present. Now, if your gut reaction to these pictures is like, oh gosh, I don't like this, well, it's understandable if it's the first time that you're seeing these types of images. However, I would challenge you to consider and think and realize that, this is just normal. It's a healthy part of, being a human being. And it's just a variation of a healthy cycle that we experience. And so it's really no different from like having, I don't know, healthy eyes or a healthy, mouth or something. Like, these are indications of a healthy cycle, a healthy vaginal environment, which is great. So, even if these images may be like different to look at, and I have to just laugh at this one on the right because like it's so like aggressively just amazing. So yeah, I would just leave you with that to just think it over and realize, like, why might this make you feel uncomfortable? Because it's literally just something that is naturally produced, and it's really nothing to be ashamed of or anything like that. Totally healthy, totally normal. And I think the more people kind of get to know their cervical mucus, the more fascinating it becomes, because then you get to know what's normal for you versus what's abnormal, and this can alert you to like an infection that you may be having, or differences in your pattern, so that you can kind of pick up on how stress might be impacting you and things like that. So this was a massive tangent here. We're gonna head back to the chart now, and I'll just leave it at that for now. Okay, so to get back on track here, the next line that we're looking at right here is going to be this sensation line. So I'm just pointing to that here with my red pointer, and I'm clicking on this line right there. Now, with sensation, there's the option to mark it with this little teal color 3 droplet indication, which means slippery lubricative sensation. The one here with an X, which just means dryness or no sensation. And the one with that lighter teal color, and the 1 droplet, which just means a smooth sensation. Now, I won't get too far into sensation because we just went on this massive ES mucus tangent, and I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time. notation is an important part of determining what type of cervical mucus is present. So it's not just about seeing the cervical mucus, it's also about feeling it. And this is really important for people to know, because I think sometimes people get caught up too much in like looking for it and seeing it. And actually what's really important is to be able to feel it, because sensation is actually like one of the most important ways that we can evaluate and determine what cervical mucus is present or not at any given time. So the next line is going to be intimacy and types of intimacy here. So this empty teal heart just refers to non-PIV sex or non-penis in vagina sex. And there's lots of ways that that can look, and so that is this type of heart notation right here. This little yellow heart with the arrow means withdrawal. This little filled in red heart means unprotected, where there is seminal fluid being received by the vaginal canal. And then we have, let's see, okay, well actually those are the only ones that we're seeing on this chart in particular. But with read your body, there is also the option for like other types of sex, and that icon or notation is just going to look like a little star. So that's how that looks, and I believe that covers most of them. There is also an option for a condom or like a barrier method, and that looks like a heart with a little condom inside of it. And so that is the different notations. And the reason why we want to be able to chart and make sure that we're, charting intimacy is because it's important, because it can influence how your cervical mucus observations are showing up. It can influence, or just kind of be an aid in keeping track of like libido, although of course the type of sex that we have is not like a direct correlation to what our libido actually looks like. And so I just want that to be clear for people, is that like you can have like a totally healthy normal libido and not be having any sex at all, and that's okay, and that's totally fine and normal. And so it just kind of depends on the person, their unique situation, what their partnerships might look like, and what they're comfortable with at any given time. So I just don't want people to be confused and think that those two things like equate immediately. The next line that we're looking at is LH testing, and this one I think is kind of fascinating, because like with LH testing, this is a biomarker that is literally just a urinary hormone test that you can do at home. It takes about 5 minutes to do, and I used to be really, really averse to LH testing, and I was like really kind of mad about it. I was like, why do people need to do this? It's so pointless. It's really misleading and confusing and blah blah blah. And through my education, I realized that in fact, again, with LH testing, it's only going to be as accurate as like the quality of the data that we're putting on the chart. So one big kind of complaint that people have about LH testing is like they get frustrated because they're testing and they're testing and they're testing and they're getting negative results, left and right, and they get frustrated, understandably. But with learning a full entire method, you realize and learn that we don't just want to be testing for LH like randomly. We actually do it in a very precise way, where we're only using LH testing on days when we have clearly observable ES and EL mucus that we're seeing. And so it's not actually necessary for people to test like throughout the whole cycle. I think that's like a huge misconception. We only really need to do it for like a few days per cycle. As you can see here, I only ended up needing to do it for 4 days before I was able to get the information that I needed. So that's all that I'll say about that for now, but it's just a handy biomarker, because like if for some reason you're not able to get enough temperatures during your fertile window, or if for some reason like you're not able to check for cervical mucus as much as you would essentially more data on the chart to help back up whether or not ovulation, was likely to have taken place on any given chart. So I now have come to love this biomarker. I think it's really handy. And I always encourage people to use it if they can. I'm going to actually skip progesterone testing here because progesterone testing is not actually like a critical required part of charting your cycle. It's really like an additional biomarker that not everyone needs to use. I'd say only like maybe a third of my clients end up using progesterone testing, and even if they do, they're not needing to use it every single cycle. So it's a really handy biomarker if you do need and want it. I love that it's like available nowadays because literally progesterone tests did not even exist like 5 years ago, and now they're like easily and commonly available. So I love that, but it's just not really necessary for everyone. And then last but not least, we have this little note section right here, and this just means that we can store little short notes on the chart. So as you can see, on this particular day, I had a little bit of a sore throat, and you can also, note things like travel or, I don't know, other symptoms and things throughout your cycle. And then I also got my first dose of the vaccine right here on cycle day 23, near the end of my cycle. So that was good to know, just because, vaccines obviously create an immune response, and our cycles are so tied intimately to our immune systems. And so I always encourage people to keep track of any vaccines that they might get, because it can, again, elicit an immune response, which may cause, in some cases, a minor fever. So sometimes people will notice like an increase in temperatures in the day or two after their dose of any vaccine. It's not just the COVID vaccine. And so I just encourage people to chart that, or any new medications or supplements that they might be taking, along with other things like travel, illness, and things like that, that have the potential to impact the cycle and how our biomarkers are literally showing up on the chart. So, I hope this has been helpful as we've been kind of walking through how to read these Read Your Body charts. One thing that I realized I missed here is this yellow cover line. And as you can see here, it's right near my pointer. And this cover line, its job is to literally just provide a visual barrier and reference point between the lower follicular phase and the higher luteal phase before ovulation and after ovulation. And so as you can see, it's just a little divide that you draw according to the rules. Again, we don't want to just wing this. We want to know what the rules dictate for where we need to draw this. And that's very specific, and you can learn that as part of learning the full method. And then not only that, but it also again provides a reference point. So as you can see, I've circled these days 1, 2, and 3 that we see labeled right here. And these temperatures on these days need to hit a certain point in reference to this yellow cover line. So for example, day 2 of my shift for what's called a standard rise in fertility awareness, this needs to be above the cover line, so it can't be touching it, and it can't be going below it. And if it did, then that would be a fallback rise, potentially. So in this case, it met the rule for a standard rise. And then the third day of a standard rise needs to be at least 0.3 or 3 of these little grid lines above this little cover line right here. So again, without the cover line, it would be annoying to have to keep on going back to these temperatures and counting up and stuff, and it just is visually kind of difficult. So the cover line's job is to provide a little visual reference points, so it's really easy to count up from it and count down from it and things like that. And I just want to also say, as we begin to wrap up, that charting is a life skill that takes time to build, and this is something that is really akin to learning how to drive, learning how to do a new craft in life, or learning a new sport. So if you're watching this video and you're like, whoa, this is a little bit, much, it's a little bit confusing maybe, I want to just, remind everyone that people, don't learn this method overnight. It takes, several months of practice and daily charting observations to fully understand it and to fully incorporate it as a habit into your life, just like driving. And just like with driving, once you learn how to drive, you gain the benefit of being able to potentially, go on a road trip, go drive to your friend's house, go drive, across country, being able to have the freedom to get to and from work, to get to and from errands. So, it's an investment of several months of training and practice and, learning with the course and being mentored with a teacher and literally, going practicing, whether driving on the back roads or in a parking lot before you go out on the highway or before you go into a busy city. And learning fertility awareness is literally the same thing. It is no different. It's an investment of a few months of time and practicing these things daily. And soon enough, it becomes like second nature. And, nowadays and even several years ago when I was first getting into charting, I'd say it took me about several months before I was able to really quickly and accurately be able to read a chart. And nowadays, I can read one in maybe 10 seconds, and it becomes just a skill that requires practice. And I just want to also remind people who may feel like, oh my gosh, that's like too much work, that's too hard. I think it really depends on how you look at it and your perspective. Because, people who menstruate and ovulate and women and things like that, people are doctors, they're lawyers, they're scientists. People are doing difficult, challenging work every single day. That again requires skill building and time and patience and practice. And with fertility awareness, this is something that I strongly believe literally anyone can do. It just is a matter of, again, having the right support and learning it in a way that makes sense to you so that it's enjoyable and it feels easy, and that you have the support and someone to check in with, as you go. So if anyone out there is just curious about this or as fascinated about this as I have become, I invite you to reach out to me if you want to learn more. You can find me online. I have another YouTube channel, if you don't know, also called Fantastic Fertility, and over on that channel I address different topics having to do with fertility awareness and health. So I encourage people to check me out there. And also, I'm going to leave information and links in this video description where you can contact me, and we can even, if you'd like, set up a time to meet to talk about this, because fertility awareness is an incredibly powerful tool that can empower people to really, I know it's cliche, but really to take charge and to take control of their body and of their cycles, and to really cultivate and deepen their mind-body connection as they move through life. So this is something that has been incredibly powerful for myself. This method, again, when learned with a certified educator, is up to 99.4 to 99.6% effective. But the key there is learning it with a certified educator and learning it in a way that, again, is going to be more long-term and kind of hold you accountable so that you're able to really, really get the most out of this method. So if you'd like to learn more, just You can leave